What is initiation? What is culture? What skills and tools do we need during a time of transition? This is Darren Silver, and welcome to The Return. Welcome, Soryu. It's good to be on this together with you.
Yeah, nice to be here with you, Darren.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you can share a little bit about your name, Soryu.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so um, it's a good name that I didn't want. I went to Japan and started training in a Zen monastery when I was in my late teens. And a few years later, I was so inspired by that system of education. I found it to be so incomparably superior to the education that I had received previously, um, both public school and then private college, which I had been at for 1 year at that point. I was so impressed by the monastic style of education that I asked to be ordained. And the master there was very kind. Shodo Harada Roshi was very kind, and he said yes. And he, for some reason that can only be explained by his endless kindness, was willing to take me on as a disciple. And I asked for a certain name, and he listened and said, okay, very good. And then on the day of my ordination, I got a totally different name. He completely threw out the name that I asked for, and gave me the name Soryu. And he was completely right. He was absolutely correct about that. And the name, as it was given at the time, is two characters. The first is So, and the second is Ryu. And it's interesting because the word So could be translated as the English word school.
Wow, amazing.
So it would mean an educational system. So you might say, for example, the Zen school of Buddhism. And that's exactly how it's put. You might say Bukkyo no Zen Shu. Zen Shu means Zen school. And Shu there is the same character as So in my name. They're just two different pronunciations of the same character. The other is Ryu, which means to help something to grow or expand or flourish, or perhaps even scale. So the way I often talk about it is that I'm attempting to scale the practice, the spiritual practice that has been passed down, in order to be of benefit in this age.
Well, there's two things that really catch my attention. One is that a few times you mentioned the Roshi being very kind. Second is before we jumped on, we talked about school a little bit, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on school in the context. So you and I have 15, 20 years, somewhere between that, of history together. And so I've heard
Yeah.
stories about the Roshi, and I'm curious about kindness in the relationship of a teacher and what really is kindness.
Yeah.
Because I've heard stories that he was very strict. I heard stories that he didn't
Mm.
put up with your protests. And perhaps underneath that is a form
Yep.
of genuine kindness. But as the stories get told, I'm like, man,
Yeah,
this guy is really really doesn't care about the small s self of Soryu.
Yeah.
In my
Yeah,
language.
definitely.
So I'd like to hear about that. Yeah.
Well, I think a good way to describe kindness is the ability, the willingness, the compassion to free a person from this thing that you call small s self. Uh, to be willing to take the risks required to free a person from what they think and what they want. This is kindness. And so he would do that sometimes by being kind in an ordinary way. That might mean that he works hard to be sure that we have food and shelter, that we're socially and emotionally safe and nourished. Uh, he, he would sometimes bring us all donuts, for example, so he's kind in that way every
Uh-huh.
now and then, once a year or something like that. But kindness in that particular case also meant, for example, I would ask for something and he would listen very closely and then he would not give that to me. Uh, here at Maple, where I live and teach, we have a group of people who are very sincere in their practice of Buddhism and in their attempt to serve the world. And one of them has made a commitment to someone in his life that he will never abandon them. And I thought, okay, that's a perfectly good commitment. But he is now interpreting that as he has to do whatever they want. And I would say that to do whatever a person wants is a very good example of abandoning someone, because that's not being kind to them. That's helping them to be trapped in the thing that prevents them from fulfilling their vow, namely their desires. So this person wants certain things and wants to feel certain ways and believe certain things. To help that person to be caught in all that is to abandon them. It's to leave them in prison. The Roshi wasn't like that. The Roshi would free you. And that often means putting you through what you don't want to go through. Sometimes it means it being extremely severe. Sometimes it means bringing you all the way to the end of what you're capable of. Because as far as I can tell, in my experience practicing, spiritual practice begins when you cannot do it anymore.
Right.
When you cannot practice and you practice, that's the beginning of a spiritual practice.
It's
Until
beautiful.
then, it's a good thing to do when you're getting ready to go beyond yourself. But to honestly, for me to go to him and honestly state, I cannot continue. And he would simply, with absolute faith in me, say, continue. And then anything that happened next was better than whatever I could have done.
So, um, I'm thinking about Maple, the organization,
Yeah.
institution, school. that you run, and I'm thinking about in modern times how challenging it is for many to make that level of commitment um, towards a particular
Yeah.
practice, and in particular in the West, where everything is made incredibly easy to access, and in fact can be very deceptive in knowing, in knowledge, in
Yeah.
wisdom. Um, so, how have you encountered that translation of kindness as it relates to Maple, to teaching, to your students?
Oh, this is an important question right now here.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And maybe,
you and I have known each other for a long time, and you've seen me go through. Yeah,
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 maybe just give a little context of what Maple is too.
yeah. Good. Yeah, yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, let me start back before there was any such thing. You and I have known each other for a long time and have encouraged each other's growth. Um, early on in your teaching, I asked you to teach here,
Right. Yeah.
and uh, I hope that that was helpful for you in seeing the incredible value that you offer. I know that it was helpful for people here. I know I had that faith simply because I had personally experienced the benefits of
Uh-huh.
being with you in ceremony
Uh-huh.
and receiving your type of kindness, your type of care,
Uh-huh.
uh, which is, different from the Roshi, but as anyone who knows you is aware, it's both extremely gentle and considerate and also very severe and considerate. um, so I knew that, and you all, and therefore asked you to help us here. And I think you also have seen potential in me that I may not have believed in at times, and you've encouraged me. And so, um, so the path that I was on was one of going from trying to be nice to being more um, severe and considerate.
Uh-huh.
So, what does that mean? Well, as you might remember, I was out in in California in Silicon Valley, and I was teaching tech entrepreneurs and even very successful um, CEOs of some major companies the practice of mindfulness. Um, and I was very kind. I was very um, nice, maybe gentle, without asking for the thing that the Roshi and another teacher I worked with, Bodhidharma Bhante in India, and others have asked from me, which is that you get to a point of desperation. You get to a point
Huh.
uh, when you hit rock bottom.
Huh.
And I wasn't asking for that. And I also worked with children and was so sticky, sweet, kind that it would really change a school. I can do that, and I have done that. And I saw great benefits in all those types of teaching. However, I didn't see the same benefit that my teachers had offered me. The benefit of taking you all the way to the point when you're writhing, only wanting to stop, but you cannot. Um, Most people nowadays, as you say, are really afraid of that. They've
Uh-huh.
been taught that there isn't anything beyond that.
Uh-huh.
And so they don't see a reason to go there. uh, the modern religions of materialism or secular humanism, uh, these modern faith-based ideologies, um, these, of course, people don't usually think of something like secular humanism as a religion, as a faith-based ideology, but I'd say that it's a church, and it has schools,
Sure.
and one of the schools is the public education system.
Sure.
And people nowadays go through seminary from the age of 5, which is unusual in world history. But um, because of that, they really believe, because they have taken on that ideology and don't know how to question it because they've learned it from such a young age, they believe that there isn't anything beyond. And if there isn't anything beyond desperation, if there isn't anything beyond despair, if there isn't anything beyond my abilities, then of course there's no reason to go to the end of those things. There's no reason to push yourself through it, because there's the sense that all that will happen is that I will be destroyed. But here we more and more ask that people do go there. And the reason is that as watching this unfold over the past 15 years, I've seen that the only thing that makes any difference, the only thing that changes the direction of our history, is the process of going through and beyond that. And so I have little time, and I can't spend the time doing anything other than what's most beneficial.
Yeah, that place right there, of just in the simplest terms, a complete disillusion and discovery of one's true nature, is what I would call, in some contexts, at some times, initiatory. Moving from one stage of life or one understanding of one's identity to another.
Exactly.
And, in
Exactly.
the Buddhist framework, and with all of your experience, I'm curious to hear, what do you feel at this time is important to learn in that space of initiation or initiatory experiences?
Yeah, great. Well, the first point I want to make is that your life is as valuable as the lives that you used to have, that you sacrificed for it. The people you have been that you have let go of prove the worth of the person you now live as. So an initiation, one way to consider what is an initiation is a way of shedding our less mature life. And to the degree that we've shed that, the new life offers value to the world. But of course, we identify with that life. We think, this is my life. And if I let go of this, I die. I am destroyed.
Yeah.
It turns out that you are not destroyed because you were not that thing. You went through that stage. But you are not that stage. That stage had real value. And actually, what happens as we let go of a certain stage of life is exactly that we finally see its sacred value. And that can be confusing because once we see its sacred value, we think, well, I shouldn't let go of this. This has sacred value. It does have sacred value. And that sacred value is actually enlivened by letting go of it and entering an even deeper kind of sacred value that we can't yet imagine. Um, of course, we offer that kind of initiation here, and part of that initiation is getting all the way down into the pit of despair. But it's important to note that you, we're not the only ones bringing people down into a pit of despair as an initiation. On the contrary, let's talk about secular humanism. Let's talk about the religion that runs the church that we all had to go to every day from the age of 5 until, say, 18, but for most of us longer, because we either went earlier or we continued to go longer. This church called school.
Right.
This secular humanist church.
Can you
Yes, go ahead.
share a little bit of what you mean by secular humanism?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, good idea. Okay. So, uh, so most people nowadays don't know that they are members of the world's most successful religion. In the same way that if you went to if you got in a time machine, went to medieval Europe and asked somebody, so are you religious? They would say, no, I'm Christian. I'm not religious. I don't believe in all that weird stuff. I believe in reality, just the real thing, Christianity.
Right.
Nothing special. In the
Right.
same way, nowadays, when you ask people, are you religious? And they say, no, I'm a secular humanist. What they mean is simply that my whole world has been enveloped by one religion, and I can't imagine any other one.
Right.
What is that religion? Well, that religion has um, three basic beliefs, each of which is a faith-based belief. One of them, that refers to the word secular, is the claim, if it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. This is a huge claim that we have been gradually accepting for a few hundred years now. Many people believe it. It's the normal way of looking at things in terms of science. And it's wrong, but people believe in it anyway. The next huge claim, that again is about secular, is the myth of progress, is the idea that things are getting better.
Right. Right.
I, of course, completely disagree with that. We're destroying life on the planet, and so things are getting worse. If you're destroying life, things are getting worse. But people say, no, wait a second, look at all these graphs that show that things are getting better. And then I say, well, you're just showing that you believe in the first thing that I said. That's all. You measure things and put them on graphs, and that's what you think is real.
Right.
So then there's the final question of, okay, so we're measuring things and as getting better. I mean, economic growth proves that things are getting better, right? Isn't that clear? Economic growth is occurring, therefore things are getting better. And then the last question, if you believe all of that, is better for whom? And that's where the word humanism comes in. It's getting better for humans. So things that you can measure are getting better for humans. It was very difficult to produce people who believed in this religion because all of it is so obviously false. All three beliefs, that humans are the center of the universe, that things are getting better, and that the only thing that exists is the stuff that can be measured. Everyone already knows that that's not true. We've known that that isn't true for 100,000 years now. Normal human religion, which we've had for 100,000 years until the past few thousand years, animism, everyone knows that humans aren't the center of things, and that things aren't getting better, and that that most of the world can't be measured. This is the normal way of looking at things throughout all of human history, but we had to create people who believed in these things. And why? Well, it's very simple. Why? Because you needed to turn people into the sorts of things that you could make factories out of. With the advent of industrialization, you needed to make people into factories.
Right.
And you needed to have a religious revolution like we'd never seen before. So hunter-gatherers have had religion, have had these spiritual practices for a long, long time. With the agricultural revolution, we had to have a religious revolution. That religious revolution included, say, monotheism, the major traditions that we think of today as religion, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism. And with that came the need to create a whole class of people who are professional priests. Of course, hunter-gatherers don't have that. There isn't a person who is, there isn't a class of people. There isn't a division of society who are professional priests. There may be people who are very spiritual as individuals, but you don't have this sort of division of labor in that way, where some people are the religious authorities and everyone has to accept what they say. With the Industrial Revolution, we needed a new religious revolution. In other words, we needed everyone to go through seminary. We needed everyone to hold the same religious views, because you can't make such a complex, intertwined, complicated civilization unless everyone believes the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And so with that came modern education. Modern education was made in order to serve industrialization. And the point of industrialization was to turn human beings into factories and into a financial system in general. Therefore, I would say, with all that as a background, that this religion does take people into a state of despair. I mean, look at the world. Look at young people. They can't get out of bed without being on 3 medications. And even when they get out of bed, they can't crawl out of the basement. There's a degree of despair, anxiety, horror, meaninglessness, terror, anger, that we have never seen before.
Yeah.
In to my knowledge, in human history. And so actually that's the initiation. Secular humanism has brought these people to that point of absolute despair so that they will give up their lives to what?
Right.
To what God is it that we then give our lives to?
Well,
the special thing about it is not that they don't bring people to a point of despair. The special thing about it is that they, unlike you and me, do not bring people through that despair to the other side.
Uh-huh. Well, there's so many directions that we can go from what you shared. But when you touch on youth, and even adults, there is
Please.
what I think is a fallacy. And that is that technology is going to help us out of this pit of despair.
Right.
And when I think about youth and really the addiction to particular technologies, particularly the phone, social media, YouTube, so on and so forth. How is that contributing to this despair? In your perspective? Because, I can kind of wander in this. It's like the human being is,
Yeah.
if not questioned, if not given a practice, if not driven through an initiatory experience, is going to be mechanical, and highly predictable.
Yes.
Highly predictable.
Well said.
So, you know, initiation being so unpopular to break the addiction to the mechanical nature of the self or the personality, um, while being given technology to say, here, this will keep you going, this will keep you afloat, this will keep you entertained. I'm just curious your thoughts on
Hmm.
that. And, for the listeners, we haven't spoken of it yet, but Soryu is deeply involved in the artificial intelligence world. So I'm kind of opening that all up. Initiation, AI, then,
Hmm.
yeah,
Excellent. Yeah. So I think it's important to note that you and I are taking two different paths in response to this problem.
yeah.
Um, and you're taking the right path. That's definitely, we both agree on that. So, uh, so one way to do it is that you create the Great Earth School, right?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And this is an excellent response to the crisis that we face. Uh, and as the listeners now know, I believe in you, but I'm on this podcast with you now, because I so fully believe in your work. Uh, so this is an excellent response. Uh, uh, how do I say? I've been in ceremony with you. I have seen you lead ceremonies, and you are offering people the opportunity to break out of this mechanical nature. The more that people engage with mechanical objects, the more they mimic them until it seems as if humans are just algorithms.
Right,
Humans are just predictable patterns
right.
that are not only able to be manipulated, but actually should be manipulated. This is the current understanding in most of the AI community. Human beings are just patterns that are to be predicted and manipulated. And you prove that that is incorrect.
Well, I appreciate that.
People who go through ceremony with you regularly, not always, of course, but that's not real. If somebody's saying always, then that's not real. People regularly come out of ceremony with you knowing, having not just evidence, but proof that that claim is false.
Mm-hmm.
This is extremely important. Uh, I am taking a different approach, which I hope is really beneficial and which I'm aware may not be. Um, you have regularly advised me not to do this, and I listen. I agree with everything you say. So, but in my folly and my idealism, I continue, at least so far. So that method is the sense that, okay, so education for the past few hundred years has been about making humans into factories. Education from that educational system is obsolete and irrelevant now. It's meaningless. And I can't imagine anyone sending their children to that school system anymore, unless they just don't understand the situation we're in. Because education henceforth is about turning humans into artificial intelligence,
How so?
turning humans into AI systems. Oh, well, AI systems are just the thing that they are factories are to farmers as AI is to factories. Uh, it's a completely different kind of a thing. It's not just more of the same. A factory is so much more than a farm that you can't really compare them. In the same way, AI is so much more than a factory that it's hard to know how to put them in the same category. AI is just this thing that can create at a pace that we've never seen before. And what does that mean? What that means is that the intelligence component of this system, of this entity, is already taken care of by the quote AI side. What's needed are humans who are in the system to contribute wisdom and compassion. And so I take people through the initiation required to become the wisdom and compassion of the artificially intelligent system. We're already merging with AI. It's already happening. We're already cyborgs, you could say. So even you and I right now, we're having this conversation, but it's mediated by technology. You and I are both cyborgs. Look, we're both wearing these things. We're already taking that step. The question is, are we able to actually bring wisdom and compassion to the system? So let me give you an example. Most of the people who, you know, people think that magic is gone. People actually think that. They think magic is over.
Sure.
Sometimes people say that any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Sure.
But I think a better way to say that is any sufficiently developed magic is indistinguishable from technology. So if you consider the wizards, of the past, they would say special words while moving their fingers in this way.
Sure.
Isn't it interesting that that's exactly what the people doing coding are like? They're saying all these special words in special languages while moving their fingers in this way.
Yeah.
This is not a coincidence. They're casting a spell over matter. They're casting a spell over the physical world to make it animate, to bring forth this mind that physical world is able to live by. That's what's happening with AI. And the question is, are those wizards able to make it in a wise and caring way? And the answer for most of them is not in the slightest.
Right.
So we need to make people like that. And we're creating the initiation so that people can do that.
Yeah. I've had people come on programs with me that are more familiar with AI or technology than I am. And they've often framed what they're up to in saying that, and this is a little bit more of my language, that what they're doing is a mirror of nature, is mirroring the way of nature of the earth. And my response to them is, you're probably not wrong, but there's one thing missing. And that's the agreements that we have with nature. That's identifying us as caretakers and part of nature. Just as much as we influence, we are part of it. So I think about that when you talk about the
Hmm.
fingers. I also think about, I believe this is in Malidoma Some's Book of Water and the Spirit, or Healing Wisdom of
Hmm.
Africa. He talks about bringing to his village
Hmm.
elders a small TV with a cassette player kind of built into it and popping a tape in there. And it's of like a Star Trek or something, which I've never seen. Um,
Hmm.
but there's this scene where
Hmm.
they kind of like go into this little portal and they close the door and then they open it up and they're somewhere else, like a different part of the
Hmm.
ship. Um, and he stops it and asks the village elders, "What do you think of that?" And they say, "Oh, we understand what they're doing very well, but we don't understand
Hmm.
why they have the technology. What's the machine that they're using? Why do they need the machine to do that?"
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So there's, in some way, the technology, the
Exactly.
more, by technology in this context, like external tools that are created, in each one of those tools, there's a degree of separation that's created with the original instructions of nature.
Exactly.
And in my mind, it's that is where we lost our way, is those original agreements. Um, what they are now.
That's excellent.
Yeah. And so, with the way you're working with
Exactly.
your students and the way that you're um, developing these capacities that I would presume are love, compassion, wisdom, would you frame those as part of those original agreements to aspire to? Or what else is there? And specifically, I mean, this can leap to a
Well,
12 year
certainly these
old,
agree.
you know?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. No, so exactly. So it's these agreements, or if you wish, relationships, these
sure.
sacred relationships. This is what it's all about. And what has been traditional through human history has been the ability to do the kinds of things that you and I are doing now, or the things that happen on Star Trek. Uh, you in the past also humans have been able to communicate with each other over long distances.
Right.
In the past also people have been able to fly or even teleport. People have been able to create light. Um, and why? Well, usually because of two reasons. One is that they gain certain technical skills.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the other is that they develop themselves ethically.
Uh-huh. Right.
They develop themselves into more deeply understanding sacred relationship.
Yeah.
And these two things through human history have typically gone together. So in the past, if you wanted to always have those powers, well, then you would have to die and be reborn as a god. And then you just lived in a world like that. How did you get reborn as a god? Well, by doing good things. So it's through your ethical development that you gain these powers. What we've done recently is figured out how to divorce these two from each other. So nowadays, people can communicate over long distances or turn on a light or fly uh, without developing themselves ethically, without more deeply understanding sacred relationship, or as you say, these agreements, without more completely agreeing to the agreements. On the contrary, by increasingly avoiding those very agreements,
Right.
they nonetheless have those powers. And that's the reason that these technologies have done such harm to life on Earth over the past few hundred years, and especially over the past few decades, because we have gained these powers without gaining the wisdom and compassion of deeply entering into sacred relationship, sacred agreement. Uh, Therefore, using these powers without any understanding of what they're for. It's not surprising then that we would destroy life at such a horrifying rate. And there's every reason to think that we will continue to do so unless we realize the initiations that allow us to use those powers within sacred relationship by entering into sacred agreement.
Right. Right. Yeah. And how are you working to teach those sacred relationships or sacred agreements within Maple, the monastic academy?
Yeah, the most important thing here is that we live together.
Uh-huh. Right. I have to say something about that because typically there's been a few years that I haven't, but let's say for the last decade I've gone out to Maple and taken um, some of the residents there out into the wilderness and just catching
Hmm.
wind that they wake up at 4:30 in the morning to sit and chant, and I just admire them for doing that. And I've always been like, gosh, that must be so hard to sit that many hours a day and chanting and meals and silence, and I've questioned them on that. And every single
Hmm.
time they say, oh no, no, no. The hardest part is living with all these people.
Exactly.
It's the community part, is living together. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you all live
This is
together there.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I in Japan also, uh, this is just known that this Ichiban Muzakashi or Ichiban Taisetsu is the Ningen Kankei. So that's Japanese. That is the most important or the most difficult aspect of the shugyo, of the training, is the human relationships. You live together. You don't like it. These are not people you ever wanted to live with. People want to live in intentional communities, but
Right.
a monastery is an unintentional community. A monastery is a place where you did not want to live with these people, and you have to, and it drives you crazy every day. And that forces you out of your little world. And you see slowly the thing that's hard is not these people. The thing that's hard is my attachment to my own way of seeing things.
Uh-huh.
That's what is most painful for me. And it takes a long time to realize that I don't like these people because they're pulling me out of my way of seeing things. But it's my way of seeing things that's creating the conflict, not these people. Slowly, each person realizes that. And with that comes sacred relationship. So, yes, this is ultimately important. Then what? Well, then you have to go outside every day. That's the deal. That's part of the schedule. You go outside, you go for a run, you go for a ski, you go to visit a sacred site in the woods. People here have that you helped us to create.
Mm-hmm.
We have this lodge, this camp that you helped us to create. I go there every day.
Mm-hmm.
I was just there right before this conversation, um, and asked about this conversation actually. Um, so we then realize, oh wait, wow, I don't just live with people. I live with all of these beings, all of these trees and moose and fox and bobcat and mice and deer and chickadees and whatever I saw yesterday night as I walked back here in the dark. Something swooped. I don't know what, probably an owl, but I don't know. I couldn't really see, just some shape. Boom. And then you start to realize I am in relationship with all of these beings. And then you realize, wait a second, I'm in relationship with the land itself. I'm in relationship with this mountain and this mountain and this mountain and this stream and this rock and this lake and this cloud. And you realize I am in relationship here. And you actually find yourself finally in the center of endless, inconceivable relationships. You see, it's not that I have to figure out these agreements. I have to pay attention. I have to listen. to what is being told to me and start to enter that communication. Okay, very good. Well, is that enough? No, because beyond that, we have meditation practices in which you slowly, intentionally let go of your way of seeing things and actually enter the endless joy of being with all beings. That joy then slowly erodes the pain that has been built up, the shame that's been built up for centuries in our bodies. And that's when you start to actually lose your life. The pain is what drives us onto the path, but the joy is what frees us from the patterns that have constrained us. The happiness, most people are much more afraid of being happy than being sad.
Sure. Sure.
So you have the meditation, you have the chanting in order to bring ourselves into these ecstatic or peaceful or aligned states of mind to work through whatever crazy stuff may be coming up and to bring ourselves into relationship with one more type of being, the sages, the guides, the spiritual guides who are through inconceivable kindness, always encouraging us along. If we don't have those relationships, then what? Then we're just gonna, as I say, we're gonna figure it out? No. So beyond that, of course, we have study. We should align our intellects appropriately. We also study the modern situation. We study the ancient texts and contemporary crises so that we're connected in all those ways, so that we're fully connected to, in relationship with the companies, with the governments that are engaged in shaping the world. So we end up endlessly remembering our connections, our relationships through all of these different means. And in that way, we hope to fulfill our vows, fulfill our end of this agreement.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I feel like we need a good couple hours to unpack everything that you're saying. Um, you know,
Mm.
lastly, you've spoken of
Yeah.
vow a few times. Um,
Mm.
and I'm curious what you mean by vow in the context you work with it. Um,
Yeah.
it may be synonymous with vision, a word that I use frequently. Um, but I'm curious about vow.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, so yes, I'd say that a very good way of understanding it is, as you say, vision. Um, you are, you're most connected with what you might call old religion, the normal religion, as I call it, the practices that we've been doing for tens of thousands of years. If we look at the practices over the past few thousand years, at that point in human history, we had become much more verbal. Uh, Before that, we were more visual. Now, then our minds got simpler and shallower, and we became primarily verbal. Um, with that came a shift from a sense of vision to a sense of vow. Now, vow is connected to the word voice, which is connected to other words like vocation. And it means you're calling. So there's the sense that you have been called by God to do something in the world. And this is a good way of looking at it as well. I should say, however, that in Buddhism we have a different word, and the word is pranidhana. And that word means something more like you have put forth an intention, a determination, a commitment to be of service in some way. So it's something that you have put forth. You have stated, I will benefit the world in such and such a way. And you did that a long time ago, and now you're being true to that. Of course, you can do it again right now. You can say, I commit to being of benefit in this way. And then you are held to that. And that's the thing that keeps you yoked to. The word yoga, again, is similar to the word, is cognate with the word yoke. You're yoked to the world by these vows. And that means that whatever spiritual insight you gain, it is put it is given to the benefit of the world. It is put toward the world, not because you're addicted to the world or attached to the world, but because as you transcend the world, you love the world more and more. You grieve for the world more and more, not less and less. And so this vow means that you have realized your purpose and you're able to actually live it, not just say it or think it or have an opinion about it, but actually live it moment by moment so that all of your perceptions and all of your behaviors are demonstrating that, quote, vow. Again, it doesn't have something to do with what you figured out. It doesn't have anything to do with what you want. What you figure out and what you want can be put into the service of your vow, but your vow doesn't depend on those things. And that's why you need a spiritual practice. That's why you need to go beyond your mental ideas and your preferences. And so we have ceremonies, you have ceremonies that allow people to realize that. The issue in the modern world is that people's vows have been, their sacred vows of immeasurable worth have been turned to the ends of manipulation.
In other words, lacking choice.
Of destroying sacred relationship.
Yeah. In other words, lacking choice to respond to the calling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the first thing that happens here is that you are called. I think it's fine to say that. It is demanded of you that you take responsibility for the quality of your own mind that allowed you to be tricked into giving up that choice. That yes, you can say, I lost the choice, but you chose to give away that choice.
Exactly.
And that has to be faced first and foremost.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm.
So you can't continue if you're still in a poor me victim mentality. Mm-hmm. You can't say, oh no, I live in a world where I can't do anything. Instead, you say, wait a second. I gave this world the power over my mind to convince me that I can't do anything.
Exactly.
I now take that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is nothing in the world that can prevent me from doing that. Only once I have given up the choice can I be made to do things. So that's this first very challenging lesson that, again, I've never seen anyone do it who didn't need to do it.
Right. Right.
I've never seen anyone. It's one of these, this point of choice is so strange because you, in reality, how do I say this? You don't have a choice. It's only once you don't have a choice that you make the right choice.
Right. Right.
And if you don't make that choice, then you don't have a choice. But you only make the right choice when you don't have a choice about whether you're going to make the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, sorry, I'm looking at the time. Really, really
yeah.
grateful for your time today. Hopefully, we can do this again soon and continue this conversation because a lot of doors opened in the things that you've shared today that can be walked through and in deeper ways. Um, so, just want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thank you for all the good work you're doing. The world is a better place because you're in it living your vision.
Awesome. Thanks, Soryu.